if I take you at face value, what I've heard you say is it doesn't really matter who wins, but I don't buy that. So what are some of the differences if one party or the other wins? Maybe from your perspective, what would be different? Because it may be hard to unwind legislation, but there's still a lot of sway that you may have in the executive office, or it may affect further elections down the line. So maybe you want to step out a little bit further in that one.
Sure. We don't have a lot of direction. We're guessing about where the Harris administration may stand. We know from her past and from being vice president with Biden that she's been extremely supportive of clean energy. And she's actually more, historically, has been more progressive than Biden, or not only Biden, but also Trump. And so if there is we believe, just face value based on her history, that there will definitely be like a tsunami of new clean energy legislation, because of her, based on her history. However, she's also been very pragmatic, and she's trying to be more neutral. So it really is going to be a toss-up to see. Trump, on the other hand, we saw what he did. And in his administration with the EPA and rolling back a lot of things. So they are very different, at least, with their energy policy. And energy policy really drives deals. It's very important. People ask me, they're like, why do you always focus on policy if you're a deal maker, if you're doing transactions? And I look at policy, I look at the economy, global economy, I look at the geopolitical tensions, and all of these factors. And if to be successful as a deal maker in this space, you got to go where the puck is going. You got to see where it's going to happen. And so we definitely look at all these different factors to kind of figure out. But granted, we don't have a clear understanding where, Harris is going to be. What I'm telling you now is based on her history in California and being the vice president with Biden and all the great things that the Biden administration did.
Gas prices in Europe have been a bit of a problem. The war in the Ukraine going on. How does this overhang as well? Are we going to see, once we get through, more decision and more investment because we know how the U.S. is going to act policy-wise? Is that really impacting things in your opinion?
Yeah, I do. I mean, that has the whole Russia-Europe dynamic with respect to just gas has really affected the supply chain and where people are looking for the oil and gas and their response to it. So, for example, Germany has taken a very different view than some of their neighbors on nuclear and on oil and gas. And oil prices also affect interest rates and affects our deals in clean energy too, as well. So I do think that we need some stability in the region. I'm waiting for this really unfortunate war to be over. Same thing in the Middle East. A lot of people don't know that a lot of the tension in the Middle East is oil-driven too, as well. There's some very large oil deposits outside of in Israel. So that we also need some stability there in the Middle East, in Europe, with Russia, Ukraine, yes.
But how does that relate back to the election, right? So we have an election coming up. Is there a clear path with one side or the other that would help maybe make oil prices stabilize to help us focus on investing in renewables and other areas?
Well, I think that one candidate is, based, again, on Harris's history. There's more excitement in the clean energy space, that there's going to be much more of a clear path for scaling up clean energy, more than the other candidate, but we don't know. We don't know yet.
And what about China policy? I mentioned it a couple of times in passing. what needs to happen there, and what can the administrations do to help shore up our industry? There's certain things that are foregone, solar or battery tech where we're at. How do we make the U.S. a stronger player in those spaces, or is that not important?
So I believe it's very important to have China as an ally. We saw what happened with solar. They're now the leaders in manufacturing with solar panels. They're considered right now a leader in critical minerals, lithium, which we need for EVs and other clean energy technologies too as well. And there's a lot of, what I'm looking for is more of collaboration with them as opposed to alienating them. But of course, I see both sides, the U.S. and the Chinese side. So I think it's they both have different views on where China sits. So it'll be important. I do think that it's important for both the United States and China to get along and to be more fair.
All right. As we get to maybe time for one last question, your thoughts. What is the one piece of legislation or things you would lobby for to help make getting deals done easier in renewable energy?
So I think a lot of our deals that we do are typically involve different expertise, different areas, different work streams. So we'll have real estate, we'll have regulatory, we will have, of course, corporate and finance and tax. And probably the biggest legislation I think that would help, one of the biggest that would help tremendously, is to speed up the process for approvals, for permitting, and also for regulatory. There's a lot, when I mean regulatory, I'm talking about FERC. I'm talking about the state regulatory too as well. There's so many things that bog down the projects, and that's why it's like easier to do. As an international clean energy lawyer, it's so much easier to do a project in Europe, in Asia, in the Middle East than here, because there's so much delay, and it varies by state. So I think to have some kind of national permitting would help tremendously. I think to have more, there's a lot more guidance we can seek from a FERC regulatory perspective, and that would help.